Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This incident took place in 2007-2008. At the time, I was a licensed esthetician preparing to start graduate school. I came across a job listing seeking estheticians for a new medical spa to perform laser treatments. This was a growing industry and the hours were ideal for my grad school schedule, with a generous hourly rate. I received a job offer and they mentioned that the compensation for the training would include obtaining our certification as laser technicians, which cost $3,500. They sent this information to me via email. This detail is important. I feel this was fair, and since the training occurred before the spa opened and did not interfere with my current job, I accepted. The training went smoothly. The owner and his wife were a bit peculiar, with the wife repeatedly insisting that we always address him as Dr. Steve and never forget to do so. No one ever forgot. They were from a foreign country, so I dismissed it as a cultural difference and did not want to pass judgment. They mentioned their plans to find brands of skincare and makeup to sell in the medical spa, which is normal, and needed to locate a line of chemical peels for their services. I offered to reach out to my contacts and secure these products for them. Although I wasn't being paid for this effort, I didn't mind because I wanted to work with quality products and knew I would benefit from it. They were extremely grateful, and everything seemed to be going well. 2 weeks before the spa opened, we began our paid work, setting up the spa. The owner's wife, who claimed to be an esthetician, was supposed to teach us some facial massage techniques. Everything seemed normal during the first week. They also mentioned that they had another partner, an American doctor, but that we wouldn't see him often. His name was included in our brochures, which I found odd. Still, I figured maybe he had invested a lot and had an ego. I brought one of the brochures home to show my roommate, and it had Dr. Steve's business card stapled to it as well. Again, this is an important detail. Week 2 is when things started to get strange. The owner's wife, whom I referred to as OW, began training us on the massages. The first few seemed normal, but then some crossed the lines of our scope of practice, such as massaging the glutes, something appropriate for a massage therapist but not for an esthetician. I also got uncomfortable vibes when they mentioned that many male clients they had lined up would be requesting this. While some men do visit medical spas, the majority of clients are women, so this was a red flag. At the end of the day, I explained to the owner's wife that the massages she was demonstrating were outside of our scope of practice, and I didn't feel comfortable performing them. I also pointed out that it could cost us our licenses if someone reported it. She responded by telling me that I was uneducated, even though I have a college degree, went to beauty school, and was about to start my master's degree. I offered to bring her the relevant information the next day. On that same day, Dr. Steve got angry when a co-worker asked him a question, and he shoved her against the wall, forcefully, and told her to get out. At that point, I decided I would start looking for a new job immediately. The next morning, I arrived at work and they told me I was an unintelligent troublemaker and that I was being let go. I was upset because they were essentially asking me to massage men in areas that I wasn't comfortable with and wasn't licensed to touch. However, since I was about to start grad school, I figured I could enjoy a month or two of unemployment and focus on my studies. When I got home, I began to wonder if the owner's wife was really an esthetician, as people in this industry should know the scope of practice and owners should be aware of this. Professional licenses are public records, so I searched, and sure enough, she wasn't licensed. Then it dawned on me, perhaps Dr. Steve wasn't a real doctor either. I checked and he wasn't. In this state, the doctor must be present in the building at all times when laser procedures are being performed. I also checked for the third doctor, the one mentioned in a pamphlet who we never saw, and he was a illegitimate doctor. They were using his name to perform the treatments. I realized that I had dodged the bullet. I immediately filed for unemployment, but my claim was denied because they said I had only worked for 2 weeks. This state requires 6 weeks of employment to file. Determined, I marched into the unemployment office with all the emails I had printed out, including the one stating that our compensation for training, which lasted 5 weeks, was worth $3,500. I won the case and they had to pay me unemployment. Now comes my act of calculated revenge. Since they fired me for pointing out that we weren't abiding by state regulations, which could have cost them their license, I decided to make sure they lost their license. With my newfound free time, I called the state and reported them for operating a medical spa with laser treatments without a doctor on site and for fraud, as Dr. Steve and the owner's wife were claiming to have professional licenses they did not possess. The state asked if I had any proof and I provided them with both of their business cards and a brochure. They also inquired about the third doctor and I informed them that he was never there and suggested they could check for themselves. They called the spa posing as a potential customer asking for the doctor and were told he's not here, but you can talk to Dr. Steve. Their business was promptly shut down. They had signed a very expensive lease in a large building on Michigan Avenue, had 3 laser machines worth several $100,000 each, and possessed supplies, chairs, and products valued at about $100,000. The business was boarded up, and one of the girls who still worked there, she was looking for another job but couldn't afford to quit without securing something else, informed me that when the authorities came to shut the place down, the owner was screaming that he had lost everything and was ruined. They were also being charged with impersonating a doctor and practicing without a license. The owner's wife was yelling at him saying, "You said this was going to be easy and not a big deal, and now we have nothing and will have criminal records." She had been calling me, telling me that unsavory men were coming in for those questionable massages, and the owners were trying to encourage her to be extra nice and go out with them if they asked. My former co-worker was now relieved because she managed to get out of there early within the final round of job interviews and could rely on unemployment benefits until her new job started. She no longer had to fend off creeps. As for me, I found a new job but thoroughly enjoyed my first term of grad school with extra time to study and straight A's. When you play risky and illegal games, you win unfortunate prizes. About a year ago, when my wife and I decided we needed a change of scenery, we were both working from home and felt suffocated in our tiny apartment in the city. After months of searching, we found this quaint little house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It seemed perfect, spacious, affordable, and far enough from the hustle and bustle of the city life. The first few months were blissful. We set up our home offices, planted a small garden, and even adopted a dog. Our neighbors seemed friendly enough, always waving hello when we passed by. But then about 6 months into our stay, we started noticing some tension between the two houses directly across from us. On one side lived a middle-aged woman with her husband and 2 kids. They seemed like nice, normal family. And on the other side was, well, let's just call her Karen. From day one, something seemed off about her. She was always peering out her windows, watching everyone's coming and goings, like some kind of neighborhood sentinel. At first, the disputes between Karen and her neighbors seemed petty. She'd complain about their kids being too loud or their dog barking. But as time went on, her behavior became increasingly erratic and aggressive. She'd yell at anyone who dared to park even slightly close to her property line or let their grass grow a fraction of an inch too tall. My wife and I tried to stay out of it, but it was hard to ignore the constant bickering. We'd often find ourselves peeking through our curtains, watching the latest showdown unfold. It was like having front row seats to the worst reality TV show ever. Things took a turn for the worse about 3 weeks ago. The nice family's mom, let's call her the wheelchair lady, got into a terrible car accident. I remember hearing the sirens at night and seeing the ambulances rush by. The whole neighborhood was shaken up. A week later, we saw the wheelchair lady return home. She was in a wheelchair, looking pale and weak. Her husband had to carry her inside, while their kids trailed behind, looking worried and scared. It was heartbreaking to see. And that's when things really started to heat up with Karen. You see, the family had to install a ramp to help the wheelchair lady get in and out of the house. And for some reason, this absolutely infuriated Karen. She started ranting about property values and neighborhood atheistics. It was ridiculous. The ramp wasn't even visible from her house. Which brings us to this morning. I was jolted awake by the sound of screaming. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but as I became more alert, I realized it was coming from outside. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. There was Karen standing in her yard, screaming at the top of her lungs, and she was red-faced and wild-eyed, gesturing wildly at the wheelchair lady's house. "That ramp is illegal. You can't just build whatever you want. This is bringing down our property values." The wheelchair lady's husband came out trying to calm the situation. "Please keep your voice down. The ramp is perfectly legal. We have all the necessary permits." "I don't care about your permits. It's ugly and I want it gone." The wheelchair lady appearing at the door. "What's going on? Why are you yelling?" "You! This is all your fault. You're ruining our neighborhood with your disability." My wife had joined me at the window by this point, and we exchanged shocked looks. Husband says, "That's enough. Go back to your house and leave us alone." But Karen was beyond reason. She stormed across the street, marching right up to the wheelchair lady's property. We watched in horror as she shoved past the husband and approached the ramp. The wheelchair lady says, "What are you doing? Get off our property." And then, in a moment of pure insanity, Karen did the unthinkable. She grabbed the wheelchair and shoved it hard, sending the poor woman careening down the ramp. We heard a sickening crash as the wheelchair hit the ground, tipping over and throwing its occupant onto the hard concrete. My wife gasped in horror. I was already reaching for my phone to call the police when we heard more commotion. The wheelchair lady's children had come running out of the house, no doubt woken by the noise. The son says, "Mom, are you okay?" The young boy, who couldn't have been more than 12, rushed to his mother's side, while his older sister, a teenager of about 17, had a different reaction. She took one look at her mother on the ground, then turned to Karen with fire in her eyes. Before anyone could react, the daughter launched herself at Karen. Her fist connected with Karen's jaw with a sickening crack. Karen stumbled backward and the girl wasn't done. She tackled Karen to the ground, scratching and punching in a blind rage. "How dare you hurt my mom, you crazy witch!" By this point, I had gone through to the police and was frantically explaining the situation. My wife had run outside to try and help the wheelchair lady, who was still lying on the ground, clearly in pain. The next few minutes were chaos. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. The husband was trying to pull his daughter off Karen, who was now wailing in pain. The young son was crying, holding his mother's hand. When the police and ambulances arrived about 10 minutes later, it was like a scene from a movie. They separated the fighting parties and started tending to the injured. The wheelchair lady was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, while Karen was held down and examined by paramedics, her jaw clearly broken. As the officers started questioning witnesses, I approached one of them. "Officer, I have surveillance cameras that caught the whole thing. Would you like to see the footage?" "That would be extremely helpful, sir. Can you provide us with a copy?" I nodded and quickly went to retrieve the footage. As I handed it over, I overheard the officers discussing the situation. Officer 1 says, "This is a clear case of assault and battery. That Karen woman is facing some serious charges." Officer 2 says, "What about the daughter?" "She did a number on Karen. We'll have to investigate further, but given the circumstances, it might be considered self-defense or defense of others. We'll let the DA sort that out." They ended up loading Karen into the ambulance. Karen, as it turned out, was facing multiple charges: assault, battery, trespassing, and violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Her house went up for sale barely a week after the incident. Rumor has it she's moving to a different state to avoid the shame and potential jail time. As for the daughter, she was cleared of any charges. The district attorney deemed her actions as justified defense of her mother. She's become something of a local hero, though she seems embarrassed by all the attention. The wheelchair lady is recovering well. The fall aggravated her spinal injury, but with physical therapy, she's making progress. Her family is considering pressing civil charges against Karen. which most of us wholeheartedly support. As horrible that day was, some good came out of it. And hey, at least we finally got rid of Karen. Good riddance indeed. I've always tried to be a good older sister, you know? I thought that's what family was all about. Looking out for each other, being kind, that sort of thing. But my younger sister, she's been a whole different story. From the time she could talk, it was like the world revolved around her. I remember when she was 3 and I tried to share my favorite stuffed animal with her. Instead of being grateful, she threw a fit because it wasn't the exact color she wanted. That should have been my first clue, I guess. As we got older, things only got worse. While I was busting my butt with school and part-time jobs, trying to save up for college, she was demanding designer clothes and the latest phone. And our parents, they just gave in every single time. She's just spirited, they'd say. Or, that's just her personality. Meanwhile, if I so much as sighed in frustration, I'd get lectured about respect and gratitude. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but living with her has been challenging, to say the least. Especially now that she is 15 and I'm stuck at home trying to save money while attending community college. The entitlement has reached new levels. Just last week, I was in the middle of a huge paper when she barged into my room. Hey, I'm hungry. Make me a sandwich. I'm kinda busy right now. Can't you make one yourself? Why are you always so selfish? You never do anything for me. Are you kidding? I made you breakfast this morning, and lunch yesterday, and whatever. If you don't make me food, I am telling mom and dad you're being mean to me again. And just like that, she stormed out. I knew if I didn't cave, she'd twist the story and I'll be the one in trouble. So there I was, making yet another meal for my perfectly capable sister while my paper deadline loomed. It's not just food either. She expects me to be her personal chauffeur, her tutor, her maid. You name it. But heaven forbid I ask her for the smallest favor in return. Last month I caught a nasty bug that had me bedridden for days. My chronic illness flared up, making everything 10 times worse. I could barely move, let alone get to the kitchen. So I asked my sister if she could bring me some water. Hey sis, could you please grab me a glass of water? I am really not feeling well. Are you serious right now? I'm in the middle of a TikTok. Get it yourself. Please, I can barely stand up. I'd really appreciate it. Oh my god, you're so annoying. Always playing the sick card. Fine. She stomped downstairs, came back and practically threw the water at me. Half of it spilled on my bed, but she was already slamming the door before I could say anything. The worst part is our parents never seem to notice or care. Anytime I try to bring it up, they brush it off. Mom, Dad, I am really concerned about how my sister is behaving. It's not normal for her to be this rude and selfish all the time. Oh, come on. That's just how sisters are. You two will grow out of it. Maybe if you were a little nicer to her, she wouldn't act that way. Nicer? I do everything for her. She never lifts a finger to help anyone else. Now you're exaggerating. Your sister is a sweet girl. She's just passionate. It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter what I said, they refused to see the problem. I started to feel like I was going crazy. Was I the one overreacting? But deep down, I knew this wasn't right. I even warned them that if things didn't change, I'd have to distance myself from the family for my own sanity. And they acted like I was being overdramatic. That is until the family reunion last week. It was the first time in years we'd all gotten together, and I was nervous about how my sister would behave. Turns out, I had good reason to worry. We were all sitting around catching up when my 12-year-old cousin tried to show my sister a magic trick he'd learned. Cousin says, "Hey, want to see something cool? I've been practicing this card trick and..." Sister, rolling her eyes, no, that stuff is for babies." My cousin's face fell, but my sister didn't even notice. She was too busy glaring at everyone else, acting like she was too good to be there. That's when our older cousin stepped in. "You know, that attitude of yours isn't cute. If you keep treating people like this in the real world, you're going to get a rude awakening." Sister scoffing, sure, okay, whatever you say." "I'm serious. People aren't going to put up with your behavior forever. You need to learn some respect. Younger cousin says, yeah, you always look at me like I'm stupid or something. It makes me not want to talk to you. For the first time ever, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross my sister's face. But more importantly, I saw the shock on our parents' faces. It was like they were finally seeing what I've been trying to tell them for years. The drive home was tense. My sister sat in the back seat while our parents whispered to each other. When we got home, they called a family meeting. Dad says, we owe you an apology. We didn't realize how bad things had gotten. Mom says to my sister, your behavior towards others, especially your sister, has been unacceptable. That ends now. What? But I didn't do anything wrong. They are all just being sensitive. No, they are not. We've let this go on for too long and that's on us. But it stops today. They laid out new rules. My sister would have to start doing chores, making her own meals, and treating others with respect. If she lashed out or refused, there would be consequences. No phone, no allowance, no going out with friends. To say she didn't take it well would be an understatement. There was screaming, tears, accusations, and the works. But for once, our parents didn't back down. It's been a few weeks now, and while things aren't perfect, they are definitely improving. My sister still grumbles about having to do dishes or make her bed, but she's doing it. She's even started saying please and thank you occasionally, which is huge progress. The other day, she actually knocked on my door instead of barging in. Hey, I made too many cookies. Do you want some? It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about our relationship. Maybe we could become the kind of sisters I'd always wished we could be.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.